Everyone on this panel, come on up. We got Edgar, Josie, Vishal, Mitya, Clayton, and myself. I'll sit here. You guys get all cozy over there. What's up? Yeah, like Seb said, you guys are all legends. Day 27 and going, so this is the last panel on the last day, and we're going to have some fun. What we're not going to do is just go down the line and then back up the line and then down the line and back up the line. Let's mix it up. You know, you guys feel free to talk to each other. You guys ask each other questions. It'll just be one big, open, fun. Yeah.
Is this on? Is this on?
Yes. Everyone's got one? Cool.
Let's do this.
Yours not on? Oh, we're good. Cool. Cool. So my name is Robbie. Why don't we first start just by a little bit of intro, but we'll keep it real quick. We've got plenty of time on this panel too. So real quick, why don't you everyone introduce themselves and your project very quickly, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty.
Yeah, I'm Clayton, do growth at EigenLayer. Before that, I was at Figment for about 4 years doing protocol strategy. So recently on the EigenLayer team as of last month.
I'm Mitya, co-founder of Drop, liquid staking protocol for Interchain, backed by Lido. Before that, I was at Confio and PTP.org.
Hi guys, Josie here, co-founder of Milky Way. We started as a liquid staking protocol for the Celestia TIA token last year, and we have since branched out to build the restaking platform for the modular ecosystem. Lovely to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Hey everyone, I'm Vishal, one of the co-founders of Stride Labs and a contributor to the Stride protocol. Stride is a liquid staking protocol for Cosmos and modular blockchains, servicing 14 different LSTs today and many more to come. Before this, I first worked at Basis, which was a stablecoin project back in 2018, back in the day, and worked in TradFi for a few years after that, and I've been in Stride for the last few years.
Hello guys, I'm Edgar from Kiln. I'm a protocol specialist there. I was at Ledger before joining Kiln. We are validators in the space, in the restaking space as well as the liquid staking space, so very excited for this panel.
Awesome. So since we combined these two panels, originally it was going to be liquid staking and then it was going to be restaking, why don't we kind of just separate the two topics for broad level's sake? Does anyone want to take a stab at, what is liquid staking, what is restaking? These are not the same thing, so why don't we just kind of like put that into the ether as far as why they are not the same? What differentiates the two?
To think about staking and simplifying it as much as possible, there's 3 actors, right? There's like validator, token holder, protocol. Restaking is validator, token holder, protocol, ABS selection. So the most important part is what that restaking strategy is going to look like. Obviously, there's unique things that you can do with an LST that creates a different value proposition for certain groups of users. But in terms of like what the spread is on risk and reward, it's pretty much similar across most of them. So I would say that's the main difference.
Okay, awesome. So before we get into restaking with AVSs and all of that, what that entails. So validator, token holder, and protocol. The most obvious and conglomerate example of this is going to be Lido, who has amassed a really significant portion of stake in the Ethereum ecosystem. Seb mentioned a really important question about not recreating the same traditional financial problems that we have with monopolization in TradFi. And so, looking at this Lido example and the almost monopolistic size that they have on stake, do you guys think there is a reasonable path to decentralize this stake? Is it a problem that Lido has this much stake? Why or why not?
I guess I can start on this one. So first of all, just talking of the numbers. So that I guess Lido. So then we're talking about Ethereum. The way it works in Ethereum now, out of all the staking market, 40% is liquid staking, out of which 28% is Lido. So out of all the staking market in Ethereum, Lido is then around maybe like 15%. So yeah, just talking of the scale, I don't think it's really fair to say it's monopoly, really. But then I think when we talk about liquid staking protocols, you should look at the different levels, right? So there is a liquid staking protocol, but then there are also node operators that work with the liquid staking protocol. And yeah, I think we should look at what is the strategy that they're using to redistribute this, distribute the stake across the node operators, what are the practices that they're using for it, and I think this is where decentralization actually can happen. So yeah, I think when you think about Lido, you should see, okay, like are they doing a lot to contribute to decentralization of the space when they deal with the node operators? And I think the answer is like clearly yes, they do a lot. They're pretty transparent about it. So I think from that perspective, I wouldn't really say this is like a threat and a monopoly that threatens the space. I think that's a very strong player that contributes a lot to decentralization. Having said that, I think everyone would be super happy to see more very strong liquid staking providers, restaking providers, just because it's healthy. And yeah, I hope that's what we're going to have in Interchain.
Awesome. Okay, so now extending this into the restaking space, you know, we have this amassment of stake in a particular protocol. What are the decentralization properties of such protocol when it comes to restaking? Do we have to think about centralization in a similar way and try to decentralize the operator set as much as possible? For the restaking protocols up here, how are you decentralizing your operator set?
Am I the only restaking protocol right now?
No, I think we have Milky Way as well.
Okay. So for us, we actually, that's a great question. And so for, I guess Eigen and Symbiotic and a few of the others, they have what we internally call kind of an operator-centric model, which is exactly what we think of this like whole centralization or decentralization thing, right? Users, you know, delegate to an operator, and then operator then chooses the ABS that they want to secure. So this is very, you know, centralized in terms of the operator set. So we're like, okay, maybe we can kind of like, you know, flip it up a little bit just to decentralize it. So actually for Milky Way, for our restaking protocol, it's going to be very programmable, where the AVSs can actually choose the operators that they want to be secured by. So basically users choose the ABSs that they want to secure, and then the AVSs then choose the operators that they want to then secure them. So it can be as centralized or as decentralized as they want it to be. So it can be like, okay, I'm gonna, you know, open up to space and let basically anyone be able to join the set. Or they can have certain parameters where it's like, you know, need to have certain self-stake or certain delegation amount. So it's going to be very programmable, because that's exactly what we think, that like we shouldn't be the one defining the rules. It should be up to the AVS to define in terms of the decentralization how much of a risk appetite they have.
Yeah, I think to, you know, looking at restaking, it's naturally more complex, you know, ecosystem compared to a staking protocol. So generally that's going to lead into concentration, because a lot of people do participate in systems in a passive way, and then, you know, aggregating, you know, capital into, you know, smaller group of vehicles is just like a natural thing that would happen in that regard as well. So how do we allow LRT vehicles to be created quicker is probably a solution, without like changing the market dynamics itself, because then you have to start, you know, making rules as a protocol that is like limiting how people can actually scale out their business models on chain.
Awesome. Okay. And so that would be like creating like more things like Swell and EtherFi, and like kind of like more permissionless types of LRT projects.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And I was previously at Rio. That code is now open source at the foundation. So hopefully a lot of people can use it and make more LRTs in the future.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'm seeing like two dimensions on which we can decentralize. We can decentralize at the LRT level, and then we can decentralize at the operator level. And that's great news. Open sourcing code is how we get things more permissionless. And so that helps a lot at the restaking level, at the protocol level. And so at the operator level, what can be done to further lower the entry barriers so that we can have some more permissionless, even if it's not fully permissionless, but how do we take a step in that direction to make more permissionless types of operators?
Yeah, I mean, anyone can run an operator on EigenLayer right now. You know, I think the way you make it more attractive for different groups of network participants is by actually having incentives on chain, which, you know, we are planning to roll out here soon. And so, more carrots in the system as opposed to sticks, and having more standardization in place as well. So making sure key management is easier. Depending on the network that you want to run, right? Maybe you do only want a specific group of selected actors that are really sophisticated. But if decentralization is more of what you're looking for, you need to have simplicity top of mind.
And is it similar in Milky Way as far as how low is the barrier of entry when it comes to being an operator?
It's going to be permissionless, so completely up to the AVS to decide in terms of how strict they want it to be.
Awesome.
Because it's the AVS that would choose in terms of the operators that they want to secure them.
Okay. Okay, maybe we'll get more into the mechanism by which users can choose AVSs and AVSs can choose operators or vice versa. But first, let's bring the liquid staking portion of this kind of more forefront. So, taking EigenLayer as an example, everyone can kind of spin up an eigenpod and stake their ETH in that, or commit it directly to an LRT. And so for the liquid staking projects on this panel, when it comes to, you guys have your liquid staking projects, but you've seen the rise of these liquid restaking projects. What observations have you made and what adjustments have you had to make in your business models to sort of understand that these LRTs exist now? What changes have you had to make to adapt to coexist with these LRT projects? If any.
There are no LRTs in Cosmos yet.
None. For now. Yeah, I think for Cosmos it's kind of early, let's say. So we will have to see how exactly it evolves. Yeah, and I'm actually not sure if we're going to see a future when people kind of combine these two models together, or if they're going to be separated in two, which is kind of yet to be seen as well. Both could be an options potentially. This probably makes sense when kind of people specialize in there's LST that then provides collateral to LRTs and so on. Yeah, but for us it's pretty early, to be honest. So yeah, we could only guess so far.
Yeah, I think that's all right for Cosmos today. It's not really that impacted by LRTs, but I think we have seen a lot of action on LRTs on Ethereum, and I think the natural inclination is eventually we're going to see that in other ecosystems like Solana or Cosmos or any other ecosystem. And so it does make sense to start thinking about how this might affect users. And I think it raises kind of an interesting dichotomy between LSTs and LRTs. I think for most users, for an LST, that serves two purposes. One is you secure the chain. You are contributing to the economic security of the chain. And the second is that you can earn yield with these tokens. Now you can go deploy them elsewhere. And there are users that care about both of these. But in my experience, I think most users care predominantly about the second one. And the staking is, some users care a lot about it, but for the majority of DeFi users, they care most about yield or how they can get sustainable or safe types of yield. But the source of that yield or the benefits of it, some people care about it, but it's not 100%. And I think we're going to see that a little bit with LRTs. Right now, my impression is LRTs mostly, it's somewhat hard to compare the yield of an LRT and LST. A lot of the LRT yield right now is points farming, so it's unclear what the actual net yield will end up being. LST is obviously your yield comes natively from the chain, so it's extremely explicit. I would imagine relatively soon we're going to move to a world where LRT yields are also more definitive, and then you get this weirdness where LRT yield might be higher or lower than LST yield, and then do users, will they just go to whatever one is higher? Will they go to the one that they understand better? LST is maybe a little more understandable. LRTs might be more, the types of yield you get might be more novel. You might prioritize that, or you might be like, hey, I really like this DeFi application, I want to go use that LRT. But I think we're going to start seeing a fracturing. Right now, it's basically the market for LSTs is, are there users that want to participate in DeFi and access yield on top of that? And that's basically the entire market. And now we're going to see much more fragmentation in that market. And it's not obvious to me what's going to happen. Is it that LSTs and LRTs have to combine? Everyone has to do both. Everyone has to be whatever is the maximal yield. Will it be oh, there's one token, this is going to be the safest yield. This one's going to be the riskiest yield. How are we actually going to go into that fragmentation? Because the dimensionality of staking tokens now is 10xing.
Actually, another thing is in terms of fragmentation, that's a great point. So for us, since we're building the first restaking platform on the Cosmos and modular ecosystem, so we are not building a liquid restaking token issuance on top of our restaking platform, but there will be another company doing that. And then for them, they're actually going to intake, since we're doing TIA, and then so it's going to be TIA, Milky, SETIA. What will your DTIA, okay, DTIA. And then so it's actually a great way for users in a way to like kind of combine it. And then because they get, one LRT regardless of which token they input it. So in some way it's a great way to see it as consolidation of the fragmentation. And then apart from obviously the liquid staking yield that they'll get, they will also get the restaking yield on top of it when they hold the liquid restaking token.
Yeah, and I think that's a kind of killer use case for the Ethereum, kind of staking these things on top of each other and then getting all the benefits possible. I think that's a hot space, right?
Yeah, I realize it's one step at a time, but I've heard Sri Ram at EigenLayer point to the idea of more than just Ethereum as potential restaking collateral. And so I imagine a world where we could have some liquid staking tokens that are interest-bearing as collateral economic security for AVSs. What is kind of like, if you wanted to jump in, yeah.
Isn't it happening already, though? I think that
in
symbiotic you could do LSTs as collateral. I think they support Ethereum as collateral as well now. So it's, yeah.
Yeah, symbiotic and EigenLayer will support all ERC20s. So
awesome. And so what's the general theme there? Like when you're considering like an appropriate token for economic stake of your chain, like what are some of the factors that you consider?
I mean, the degenerate in me is like anyone can do whatever they want, right? So I think starting out with ETH is like, setting the tone, right? Like this is this universal asset. The main difference between, symbiotic and EigenLayer as well as like, for our reasons versus their reasons, we're choosing the ability to natively restake ETH on EigenLayer. But, in the future, stablecoins, Bitcoin derivatives, native ABS tokens that may be applied to a broader group of ABSs could be something that you can create an LRT on as well. So I would like to see people just go crazy,
For Milky Way as well, we're going to do a multi-asset approach. And actually how this came about is obviously there are other blue chip assets apart from TIA, but actually one of the pain points that we see the most in terms of the ABSs or projects that we're working with is a lot of them actually don't want rented security in the beginning, right? And they only do it because they can't accrue enough security by themselves. And that's why they need to, rent security from some other token. But eventually they do want to be secured by their own token. So what we do is like we have this like params where they can switch in terms of the assets they can choose in terms of like what assets they want to be secured by. So probably it's like 100% TIA in the beginning, and then after the token launch, since it's relatively low market cap, it might be like 5% their own token, 95% TIA, and then as their token grows in market cap, then it's like, gradually till it's 100%, and then they no longer need to rent security. So that's how we see it, and a lot of projects like this approach, yeah.
I think to make it even more confusing, what's likely going to happen is this index sort of token where, any yield-bearing asset and any reward that you're receiving from, your ABS selection strategy will likely need a crypto representation on chain as well. Like even if you're restaking on 100 different ABSs and, one token or one ABS is giving you like $10 a month to do that or something. The gas cost, at least on Ethereum, it's like, well, I'm just never going to touch that token. But if there's a, representation of the entire stake position, you can actually leverage that, reward in DeFi.
Okay, and so how are you thinking about allocation in these mechanisms? Like, is there, like you said, if you're going to rebalance your position across all these different ABSs, for different yield reasons, right? That's going to cost you a ton in gas. Is there any kind of like more efficient mechanism that you foresee?
Yeah, I mean, when I was at Rio, what we were selling, right, is like the strategy manager role. And, I think over time, once more sticks enter the system, once people do start getting slashed and they see that, potentially, right, like maybe, if there's a catastrophic event on EigenLayer because someone wasn't necessarily doing that risk management part, that's going to be a huge marketing lever for any LRT. You need to do that on the technical side as well, like how many eigenpods are you doing? How much do you want to like do selection on a monthly or a quarterly basis? And then you also like want to have input from your governance token holder community because maybe saying the quiet part out loud, but a lot of LRT vehicles are like on-chain asset managers, and so how do you make sure that you're doing this in a compliant way or in a way that like at least regulators are like, okay, that's good enough.
Makes sense. Zooming out a bit and kind of considering like the duality of man that we have here, like there's Cosmos and there's Ethereum, and so these two ecosystems look very different. When we're thinking about this liquid staking on the verge of restaking in Cosmos, and then we see the paradigm on Ethereum. Generally, what are the two states in like the current present moment of each industry? How do they differ? And then do we generally see those converging, or is there going to be some nuance as to differentiating those two ecosystems going forward?
You mean liquid staking and restaking conversion, or Cosmos and Ethereum conversion?
The state.
Everything converging.
I generally mean Cosmos and Ethereum.
Oh yeah, I think there is some convergence that has been happening from the perspective of like Cosmos started the idea of app chains, and then this idea is kind of everywhere. I think Cosmos also started, let's say, having difficulties from fragmentation because it pioneered the app chain idea, and now these difficulties are kind of in the L2 space as well. So I think, if you look at it overall, these two ecosystems started from two very different places, and now they're coming to, in a sense, kind of similar architectures. So yeah, that's actually pretty interesting to observe. And I'm excited about the fact that Cosmos, because it had all these challenges from the beginning, has actually created pretty cool solutions for it. Like, for instance, what Skip API is doing for cross-chain swaps, and what Squid is doing for the same. It's pretty amazing. And like people, when they're coming from the Ethereum world or like outside of Cosmos world in general, they're pretty excited about like this has been solved. So yeah, I think there's a lot that people can learn from the Cosmos path and kind of apply this in Ethereum or some of the other ecosystems as well. So yeah, Cosmos is eating the world in a sense, and yeah, that's really good to see.
Purely vibes based. My sense is there's like a slight difference in maybe like mission or what people think of when they think of Ethereum and Cosmos, and they are converging definitely to some extent. My loose sense is I think there is like a slight difference in what people think of these ecosystems for and what kind of niche they're going to fill. Ethereum, I feel like, is, in my mind, mostly geared around using ETH as money, and how can this whole ecosystem prop up ETH, and like how far can we go in this concept of take this really big asset and build these really interesting primitives on top of it. And there's all sorts of really great research on Ethereum, but in my mind, because it's more institutionally focused, more around this really big asset, it's a little bit slower as well. It takes a long time to make changes. Changes that are made are very thoughtful and very impactful. Like there's rolled out to hundreds of thousands or millions of users. But it feels more slow-moving, more geared around how can you make this really big institution that can treat ETH as money. And if you look at all sorts of projects in Ethereum, they all have kind of like socially agreed upon ETH as being their unit of currency or a unit of domination. And you take like Base, or you take any project, even Uniswap, like a lot of them drive value back to ETH fundamentally. For Cosmos, I think the driving goal is more sovereignty and experimentation, as well as giving apps value curled back to apps. So I think we see this. We see many more Cosmos chains, many more Cosmos chain failures because there's more experimentation. Also, many more interesting successes, like to your point, Skip. Very interesting success, totally novel use case. Something we really have not seen before, and probably would have taken like 2 years of writing EIPs to do this on Ethereum, but rolled out in just a few months with a relatively small engineering team in Cosmos. I think we're going to keep seeing that in Cosmos. You have so much more freedom and flexibility to pursue pretty novel types of experimentation on the consensus layer, on the application layer, on the bridging layer, et cetera. But then also, I think for Cosmos, we're also, or one step back, I think crypto in general, so far, many apps rely on the base L1 for distribution of their own product. So you look at most applications on Ethereum, the main value they get from being on Ethereum is they can tap into the user base and infrastructure that exists there. And for just given the state of crypto today, there aren't that many users. And so it matters a lot that you can tap into distribution networks. I think we're starting to hit the point, though, where lots of applications that have their own distribution, that have their own users, independent of their own L1. Good example of this, DYDX. They're started on Ethereum, but their brand and their presence is built up such a point where users think of DYDX as a separate application. And then for those kind of apps, I think it makes a lot of sense to start going into the Cosmos model where you can move faster, you can capture more value, you can build more bespoke apps. I suspect we're going to keep seeing this sort of delineation where you see apps that are bigger want to capture more value, move to the Cosmos type model, and apps that need more experimentation, and apps that want to tap into this global network of money and need really large amounts of distribution or need large amounts of capital will keep building on Ethereum.
Yeah. Just piggyback on
this
absolutely. Quickly, because I think Vishal started an interesting topic about like level of experimentation. Just for the record, I think so we're working on like LSTs, LRTs in the space, I think with 3 completely different architectures. So there's appchain, then you're migrating to a rollup soon, right? We're building an integrated app based on smart contracts, building a kind of from very different perspective, kind of similar tools for the end user. So I think that's a continuum of architectures that Cosmos enables is pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's also this paradigm of network effects where you do have, to your point, distribution, and if you can tap into the distribution network effects, you end up with some significant firepower that you can have for your project. And then there's some different environments that have some different network effects for their ecosystems. I also think that there's going to be some projects that already have distribution. You mentioned DYDX kind of went through their user adoption and graduated to their app chain. Projects may come in from Web 2 or TradFi land and leapfrog all of that, already have distribution, off chain, and then put all of that on chain and create their own sovereignty that way. And so generally, when you're thinking about network effects and how you can sort of help projects generate some adoption and generate some distribution through your ecosystems, Cosmos, Ethereum, EigenLayer, AVS ecosystem, like what are the network effects that you see present in your ecosystems, and then how can you help spread those network effects to the most effective and efficient way for the projects that are building in each of these ecosystems?
Yeah, I mean, I think, any AVS right now, it's totally their go-to-market, right? Like this alignment with this burgeoning new way of building. I think Cosmos chains as well, they want to, ride that wave together. I think the interesting thing when you're talking about such a universal asset like Ethereum is some of these AVSs, particularly, in the future, like DeFi AVSs can, get a lot of kickbacks from running the underlying infrastructure for the AVS as well, as an operator. And so you do kind of have this flywheel where it's actually beneficial to be here and get that like transaction flow kickback, which you can also do in the Cosmos or something. But I think in terms of how you do it at scale, where there's a lot of AVSs that you may be using, and then there's these sort of agreements either on chain or off chain that like do benefit you to stay. That's going to be the moat that needs to be built for any ecosystem, because DYDX is a great example. Once they realized that there was no way for them to give value back to their token holder community, they needed to go find something else to build on.
Yeah, Vishal made a great point in terms of in Cosmos, there are a lot of developers basically coming here because they're attracted to the flexibility of the tech stack, and then that's why they want to experiment and launch projects on, right? But then for them, obviously, the security is a problem, and hence that's why we talked to a lot of them, and then decided to build a restaking platform, because it's quite hard for them to connect to Eigen, for example, because of different languages essentially. And for them, when we told them about the whole multi-asset approach, they're actually super excited because they see that as basically a launch pad in their own words. They're like, oh, cool. So basically these group of early supporters, they provide security to us, and then when our token launch, then it's going to drive a lot of hype potentially, because for example, we can give them some discounted rate to purchase or do some activity with them. So in some way, they actually see us as a launch pad, which I thought was really fascinating. And I was like, okay, that's a nice way to see it. We never thought of ourselves as a launch pad, but then if it's good and then it kind of drives the community and the DeFi ecosystem, then I think it's going to be great for the community.
Yeah, totally agree with both those, and both excellent answers. Maybe one slight hot take and maybe one more criticism of Cosmos. I think the general way that most ecosystems have agreed network effects, like the most valuable one is agreeing a unit of count. Like Ethereum, everyone takes ETH, and there's not really that much coordination needed on projects from that point on. Like everyone just agrees to build on ETH. They give up a little bit of value growth around token, but as a result, they give so much value to ETH that it drives a ton of usage to the overall ecosystem. Somewhere in Solana, it's not really obvious, like Radium and Jupiter, for example, collaborate, but they both are built in the same stack, both drive value back to Sol, and as a result, share users grows the whole space. Maybe one additional network effect exist elsewhere is like shared application state. So like Radium, for example, can look at Jupyter application state, or like Pump Fun can look at someone else's application state. They're all shared. Both these are not really present in Cosmos today, and I think it's part of the difficulty why it's been a little bit harder to drive similar network effects in Cosmos. We do share users, we share wallets, there's a lot of infrastructure that's shared, but unit account is not shared, and application state is quite hard to share as well. So it's really hard to have applications that plug into an application on like X chain and Y chain as well, just because reading the data is harder. And the fact that everyone is focused on a different token has lots of pros, but I think one meaningful con is it gives a smaller shelling point for a little space. And I don't have a great solution to this, and I think it's something Cosmos is kind of grappling with right now. But I think it's one thing that's holding back the space is that we haven't yet found a way to kind of build really great network effects with all these sovereign chains. But I think it is possible. We all have a lot of shared incentives. We're building very similar things. A lot of the users are interested in these projects for very similar reasons. But I think we still need a little bit of discovery on what that right mechanism is.
Yeah, I think there's one more thing in Cosmos that is almost kind of the opposite of network effect, is just how native staking ended up working for most of the Cosmos chains. And I think it was implemented so well that now it's a problem. So it's very easy. So if you compare like Ethereum to Cosmos, like in Ethereum, it's so difficult to become, like to work as a validator. You have to have 32 ETH, you have to spin your own infrastructure, so that for everyone it was just a natural solution to use LSTs. And then when LSTs were created, like for the first time, the DeFi summer had happened already. So there was like a natural kind of thing when you just plug in your LST, boom. Now it's a huge market. In Cosmos, what we have is that native staking is super easy. Staking APRs and native staking are high. Inflation is high. So everyone is kind of incentivized to do just native staking, sit back and relax. And I think our kind of collective goal is to provide a very, very appealing alternative to this and unlock the assets. And then boom, we have a lot of liquidity for applications, rollups, whatever. And I think that's a huge problem to solve. Yeah, I think we have pretty cool teams that are working on this now, so I'm looking forward to working on this together.
Just to add to that, I think that the Cosmos ecosystem like natively incentivizes like native staking through like the importance of votes, for example, and Ethereum kind of like natively through its very big DeFi ecosystem, on top of just the fact that native staking is so complex and needs to be abstracted, it incentivizes the user to go through like an LST, because you're going to get on top of your native like rewards, you're going to get also DeFi yield.
How do the yields compare when you're talking about native staking in Cosmos? 'Cause I think I'm generally aware of how it works in Ethereum, but in Cosmos, how does it work? Or how do those yields compare between liquid staking and native staking?
It's amazing in Cosmos. It's like 11 on Celestia for now.
I mean, is that a good thing?
No, I actually, yeah, that's. I mean, it's amazing for if you want to be kind of passive and like sit back and relax. I think it's not great if you look at it, how easy it is to incentivize the user to do something else with it. And that's kind of, this is why I'm saying it's kind of blessing and a curse.
So they should still put their TIA in our protocols and then get that 11% and whatever they get on DeFi.
I think so not trying to yell at you, because I think the reward rate of staked Ethereum is too low as well. I think anyone that is releasing a highly volatile asset in a very like burgeoning but nascent industry should at least target a reward rate higher than treasury yields.
Yeah, on Bitcoin there's no yield.
Well, yeah.
I heard someone say yet. That's what I was going for. Okay, that makes sense as far as the network effects and also the liquidity and yield that we get as part of staking and restaking. And so, we talked about kind of the network effects in each of these ecosystems. When it comes to restaking specifically, there's network effects that we get in addition, because we have AVS ecosystems that go on top of this restaking yield. But that also comes with a trade-off, because we have shared security a lot of times. And maybe we'll get into whether or not this is present in the Cosmos case. But when it comes to shared security, Tarun Chitra from Gauntlet gave a talk about this at Modular Summit and basically talked through the contagion risk of a particular economic security if there was some economic security contagion, it would spread amongst the rest of the AVSs in the ecosystem that were also sharing security of that pool. And so I'm curious from the restaking projects up here, how, what steps can we take to mitigate that, if any, and how are you seeing this in theory or in practice?
I mean, I think, again, with not trying to control everything, making recommendations on what AVSs would slash, right? I mean, again, going back to the carrots and sticks, if an AVS looks like the slashing conditions are way too scary, there's 200 other, revenue sources for me if I'm like running infrastructure on AVSs. That AVS probably is going to get a lot of quality operators on the network. And so I think the market will kind of play itself out without us needing to worry about that too much. But again, if we're not worrying about it, that's when the contagion happens. But most AVSs are going to have some form of, at least in EigenLayer, what we're thinking about right now is attributable security, as opposed to total pooled security. So there wouldn't necessarily be an event where 100% of someone's stake on an operator is slashed by a single AVS, if that makes sense. Again, that's just how we're thinking about this over time. But yeah, I mean, you want to create systems where there's not an over incentive of stretching your infrastructure too thin as well. As someone who was in the operator space for like 4 years, there's generally 2 times when stuff messes up on chain. One is during the bull market, where there's just so much flashy new things, and maybe some unsophisticated actors can, aggregate a lot of capital and start spending this stuff up, and they mess up. The other is in a bear market when you're trying to cut costs as well. And that's generally by sophisticated actors who are used to running it. It's just they're losing money by maintaining that infrastructure. I think right now in the restaking ecosystem as a whole, not just EigenLayer, we need to be thinking about how we pay people first, and then start thinking about how we punish them later. That's my 2 satoshis there.
Yes, so this contagion risk and also the slashing is actually a huge problem, obviously. And so for us at Milky Way, it's back to the whole where we think it should be a very programmable approach, where we shouldn't dictate in terms of the slashing rules and also the rewards distribution and the assets, etc. So on the slashing front, obviously there's the traditional kind of burn slashing, which I think everyone's quite scared of. It's like, just burn, that's the ultimate death penalty, it's gone, right? But even in the law, right, like it's not just you break the law and then you die, right? There's, there's court, and then you get like trial, and then there's like, variations of punishments. And then so we're like, okay, that should kind of be the same as well, right? It should be down to the AVS to choose, you commit this crime, and then so you deserve this penalty. And so it will be very programmable as well for Milky Way. So we're starting with 3 different types of slashing rules. So there is obviously the traditional death penalty of the burn slashing, but there's also the stake slash, which is basically it get redistributed to other operators. So from the user's perspective, their principal or their restaked amount is never touched. And their rewards is also not affected, right? Because rewards is exactly very important. And then the third is actually the jail slash, which is just downtime. So the principal amount of the restaked will also never be touched. It will just be a little bit less rewards received. So that's how we're seeing it. And obviously we'll get, add more and more slashing rules as we evolve.
Yeah, what's also interesting for LRT vehicles as well, in terms of punishing maybe operators and LRTs as opposed to stakers, is you are aggregating all of these reward sources under like a single operator or LRT vehicle. If you get perma jailed as someone whose job it is to aggregate all of this under like a single operator address, you would have to unwind all those pieces of infrastructure that you're running on all these AVSs and spin up a brand new operator, which is much different in the Cosmos ecosystem, to where if you get perma-jailed on a network, it's just, okay, that one's done. I can just turn on another one fairly quickly. And then, the risk of like watching your, TBL like bleed out by not having access to maybe like the one AVS that's generating 20% of your, product offering, which is an APY, is significant enough.
And Josie, you mentioned like 3 different types of slashing. EigenLayer doesn't have slashing yet, but when you're thinking about slashing, are those 3 types of slashing still the types of the slashing types in theory that would get implemented when slashing is turned on?
Yeah, like, double sign events and downtime. But, a lot of these decentralized networks may not necessarily be blockchains over time. So that's when this sort of intersubjective work token in the form of Eigen comes into play, and you would be required to stake some of that amount, and then that would be the slashable amount, for anything deemed bad. But you can't do it like automatically because there does need to be some sort of governance in place with that.
Okay, I think that's a good segue into the next question here, which it's a dumb question, but I know it's a dumb question, and so there's like this. Like economic security is a meme thing that floats around sometimes, and it comes in waves. And I think there is like, I don't know, ZK is real, kinda. And so like, if everything is like, has the potential to be cryptographically proven by ZK or some other cryptographic proof, do we need crypto economic security? Or is that just a meme?
Well, I think you can... definitely the interplay, and you probably need less once you have ZK, but they feel like they fit different niches. Like you want ZK security to know, like, given these set of rules, are people following those rules or are they breaking them? Helps a lot for there. And the way I think of economic security in general is like, can the rules themselves be redefined? And oftentimes you do want, like, sometimes you're just like, no, the rules will never get redefined, in which case you're doing economic security, or you just deploy on like some smart contract or something that's like kind of immutable. But oftentimes you do want like changing rules, you want some ability to upgrade. And then, like, how do you define that? And that's often economic security. But I do agree. I think we probably have too much economic security, and it's a little bit of a meme.
I mean, depending on who you're talking to, right? Like, you're talking to like a large traditional institution that's not here yet at all, but is like willing to talk to like, the Coinbases of the world or something. They care about that number, which is interesting. It's like how much assets are staked on this network that you're trying to sell me to like move my banking infrastructure off of and onto this, right? So even if it's just like a vanity number, that's interesting for those more boring people who have to care about a lot of stuff. But then also too on just what the assets represent, like proof of work versus proof of stake. Proof of stake is a way to distribute incentives to people who are actually just holding the token as well while taking on some sort of risk. And you do like lose that network effect of that asset if you're not having some sort of staking layer as well.
Cool.
For us, not saying we agree that it's a meme, but that's also why it's back to the programmable, where we let the AVSs choose in terms of how much security they need, essentially. Because we had, some that's like, okay, we don't need a lot because they don't secure a lot of like TVL on their platform, right? But we also speak with, DeFi dApps where they do, margin trading and lending, etc. Where for them, when they speak to those institution clients, like Clayton mentioned, then it would be like, okay, I want to match dollar for dollar security. So it really depends. And also there's like, other protocols out there like Blocklist where they do social scoring, like based on reputation. So I think that's also, another good way to use it.
Maybe in the goal of being a little bit spicy, and talking about why I think it's a little bit of a meme, economic security in particular, why it's a bit of a meme. I think security matters a ton, and I think all of us on the stage would agree. But I think people fixate a lot on the one number of how many dollars are at stake, just because it's easy to interpret, and it's also the biggest number you can come up with. So you're like easy to tell someone, hey, I have $100 billion economic security. But in practice, I think your security is the weakest link. It's the minimum across all things you have. So Nakamoto, for example, one example, like how many operators you have to bribe or blackmail or give a subpoena to cause them to change their operations. That's often much easier than actually acquiring all the stake required to upseat those operators. There's also things like how secure are my operators in general? Like, are they all in the same AWS cluster? And actually, I just have to subpoena Amazon, and now like all the security of this network is gone. There's lots of different ways to look at security, and so operator diversity and how hard it is to run a node itself, or the odds of there being a bug in those nodes. All these things matter. And for what's worth, I think everyone on the stage recognizes that, and I think everyone on the stage is spending a lot of time thinking about like which validators delegate to, operators delegate to, how do you incentivize good operations by those operators, and that definitely hits in all these aspects of security. You care a lot about, are my operators different? Do they have different attack vectors? It's just annoying, or it's challenging, I think, because it's it's hard to communicate this really high dimensional problem to the public, being like, oh, here's a 10 points of security, and here's where I score on all of them. And I think people fixate a little bit too much on just this raw number of economic security.
Yeah, I like that take. And you know, we're running low on time, but we had 45 minutes for this panel, which I thought was going to be plenty, but for some reason I feel like we could go for another 45. Because it leads to an interesting question of like, how do we price this economic security? And I think you point to a lot of factors that are important. It's not just about the amount, it's about the quality of that economic security, which is not always the same. And so I think this is true of like liquid staking and liquid restaking projects, anyone who's paying a yield for stake. And so we got 20 seconds, maybe we'll go like a minute or two over, but yeah, like how do we price economic security? You know, that'll be our final question, and then any closing thoughts.
I mean, I think this leads to economic security being a meme, right? It's like if you don't need a specific
mission accomplished.
but if you don't need a specific number, right? You know, I think Ethereum like should have a lot, right? But if you're a burgeoning new ABS trying to find product market fit, you could probably just be more open with like, this is how much money we're going to give to our operator set. If you want to be restaking here, I guess, but the APY is going to be pretty small because there's too much people doing it. And then some people won't like that, and that ETH will come out of the system. So I think just there's going to be marketplace dynamics, and people are going to price this some sort of way, and willing to take the risk based on the basket that they're choosing as a restaking strategy over time.
Yeah, I think that economic security prices itself. So like when rewards go live on EigenLayer, for example, if we start seeing like 15% APY going sent to restakers, we're going to see like massive inflows on EigenLayer. And at the contrary level, like if we start seeing like 0.1%, for example, we're going to see like massive outflows. So I think that security and rewards will always like reach an equilibrium, which is fine with both parties, basically.
I want to see a project that does leveraging economic security on a transaction level. So I have very important transaction. I want to have a lot of economic security for this one, just for this one. I want to pay a lot for any of the others. That's the way to find the right price.
We call those ephemeral rollups. Okay. Yeah, closing thoughts.
Yeah, maybe just answering the question on price economic security. Totally agree with these takes so far. I think it does kind of price itself. And I suspect we will see like different products. Some products might have to pay more because people don't trust their token. Products going to pay less. But maybe one kind of meta observation. I think right now, historically, there's been very few ways to pay for security or even consume security. You're kind of like, if you're Cosmos Decay Chain, you have one option, or you had one option. If you're in like a regular L2 or something, you had one option. And so people only have this notion of like how many dollars you're paying for security. Now, a lot of the work that everyone on this panel is doing is like ways to expand the optionality of projects to pay for security. And I think really the current paradigm is probably not that good for most projects, and that it's just you get one option, like how many dollars do I pay, how many dollars security I want. But I think the security most projects care about is quite more complicated than that. Like for example, I think Stride might care about how many unique operators do I have, or how many different locations are nodes located in. And there's no ability to express this preference today. But I think we're quickly going to move to a world where projects can express their preferences and what they want to pay. Like, okay, if I have a validator with 20% of my overall stake, I actually just don't really want to pay them anymore. Like, if I want to pay more for security, I want other validators. And I think projects can start specifying, like, I care about having at least not going to a coefficient of 5. I want 3 different countries. And then, like, you're paid for whichever one of those things you're not meeting. And a lot of the work people are doing on restaking, for example, allows for these more complex preferences. And I think something we're also working on expanding the Cosmos X staking module. But I think we're going to see much more granular types of payments. Because today, I think most projects drastically overpay for security and also don't really get the kind of security that's actually best for their chain.
Well, I think on that part, though, there's less of a premium, I think, for receiving ETH as a reward token or like stablecoin, right? Because any new protocol should probably be paying a premium to node operators because they've been running infrastructure for 8 years. And it's like I've experienced a token going down 90%, in a month. So I want to make sure that there's a lot of upside early on because I want to continue supporting this network when it's like bad. So you could probably pay less for security if you're just paying them in stablecoin.
Sorry, I know we're over time. Can I ask one follow-up on that?
Well, I mean, there's no panels after this or speakers after this. So unless until Seb comes up here and kicks us off, which might happen any second. Okay. Well, I think that might have just happened. I don't know. If you want to go real quick, I don't know. I'm going to get slashed.
I'm just going to shoot over. That's a great point. I think people should rationally pay or want to get paid more for like volatile tokens. Although I feel like part of what we're seeing in this current meta with points, for example, is that there's almost like a risk, not premium, risk discount. Like for projects that you don't know the price of, but you have some chance it's going to become like a next $1 trillion protocol. It seems like people are willing to take a lower expected yield for this upside. Why do you think that might be?
Well, I mean, as a staker, right, you're not really doing anything. You're you know, I mean, there's opportunity cost elsewhere for potential future yield of some other thing. Infrastructure providers have hard costs, but also, I mean, when doing it at Figment, it's like, yeah, we want to be here first because this is where the potential upside is. And so we are going to make a bet. We are going to devote, you know, people to it, you know, hardware. We're going to, you know, sell it to institutional audiences and things like that. So in the first year, we do expect to like cover costs, and a lot of, you know, large validators or even, you know, 10-person, 20-person teams, they need to, you know, factor that in.
Actually, that's a concern that a lot of our projects have. Just one last thing. Yeah, in terms of the price fluctuation, because they're like, you know, a lot of coins are stable, but they're still not stable coins, right? And then so how's it going to work if we get the security? It's worth, you know, 1,000 mil today, it might not be worth 1,000 mil tomorrow. And then so part of the programmable rules is actually for the multi-asset approach. They can set that, okay, if this price, you know, drops this percentage in a day or whatever, they can actually switch to another asset or completely switch to stables, for example, as a part of our approach. Yep.
Very dynamic. Okay, the end. Thank you, everybody. Good stuff, man.